Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really strange moment in Chinese history, a crisis that almost wrecked a dynasty, but instead, it kind of accidentally kicked off a golden age. So let's go back in time. The year is 1000 AD. To really get what's going on in our story, we first need a quick picture of what the world was like back then. For a lot of places, things were pretty tough. In Europe, they were in the middle of what we call the Dark Middle Ages. And the great Arab empires, they had broken up into smaller pieces. The world felt, a bit disconnected. But in China, it was a totally different story. The Song dynasty was building a kind of stability that was just really hard to find anywhere else. To give you an idea, just a few years before our story, more than 17,000 students traveled to the capital city for a big exam. I mean, can you imagine a city that could handle tens of thousands of visitors? In a country that was safe enough to travel across? Something new was definitely starting. Okay, so to understand how this peace and stability was won, we need to rewind 3 years to 997 AD. Because in that year, something very strange and very dangerous happened right in the center of the empire. So, in 997 AD, Emperor Taizong dies. And in those first few chaotic moments right after his death, a secret plot gets going. The goal? To stop the official heir, the crown prince, from ever taking the throne. And we're not talking about some minor officials here. No, the people involved were right at the top. You had the Empress Dowager, who was the emperor's widow, the head eunuch, a top palace official, and even the vice prime minister. So they wanted to put the crown prince's older brother on the throne instead. But here's the mystery, the really weird part. Their plan was surprisingly bad. It was clumsy, and it was stopped really easily. So that's our big question. Why would these incredibly powerful people risk their lives for a plan that seemed so poorly planned? To find the answer, we've got to look into the past. Right. To solve the mystery of this coup, we have to understand the world the plotters grew up in. It was a time of complete chaos known as the Five Dynasties period. Just before the Song dynasty brought all this stability, China went through 53 years of just constant warfare. In a little over 50 years, 5 different dynasties rose and fell super fast. It was a time of complete uncertainty. And get this, during those 53 years, there were 14 different emperors. That means a new emperor came to power, on average, less than every 4 years. Power was never, ever secure. And just look at how these emperors left their jobs. Only 5 of them died from natural causes. The other 9? They were either killed or forced off the throne. You see, violence wasn't some special occasion. It was just normal politics. Living through all this constant violence, well, it leaves a mark. It creates what you could call a deep political trauma. It taught a whole generation of leaders a completely different set of rules about how to survive. For them, stability wasn't normal. Chaos was. Okay, so with this really dark history in mind, let's go back to that confusing coup attempt and see how this shadow of the past helps explain it. And this right here, this is the heart of the whole problem. The plotters were using the old way of thinking, the logic from the 5 dynasties. In their experience, power came from military strength. To survive, you needed a strong, experienced leader, not some young, unproven kid who could easily be overthrown. In their heads, they were actually trying to prevent things from going back to chaos.
This was exactly what they were thinking. In fact, when the Empress Dowager was confronted about the plot, she said, "It is proper to install the elder son." She truly believed that putting a younger, less experienced emperor on the throne was a huge danger to the dynasty. She was just acting based on the brutal lessons from her own past.
The clumsiness of their plan also starts to make more sense now. During that chaotic 5 dynasties period, a very unique political culture developed. Officials started to see themselves less as loyal followers of a specific emperor and more like, professional employees of the state. If the emperor, the boss, changed, they just worked for the new one. So for them, changing the emperor wasn't treason. It was more like a business decision about who should be the next CEO. So how did this old way of thinking finally get defeated? And how did a new era of stability rise up out of this crisis? Well, the hero of the story is Prime Minister Lu Duan. He had a reputation for being not confused in big matters, and boy, did he prove it. He sensed the plot was happening right away. He very cleverly locked the head eunuch in a library. Then he calmly talked to the empress and insisted that they must follow the law. After that, he rushed to hold the official ceremony to make the crown prince the new emperor, and he even checked with his own eyes to make sure the right person was sitting on the throne.
Lu Tuan's quick thinking and brave actions sent a really powerful message. The era of chaos was over. He basically declared that the rules of the country were now more important than the strength of any one person. The rule of law had finally beaten the logic of pure power.
You know, this incredible story from over 1,000 years ago reveals a powerful lesson about how the past can affect the present, sometimes in ways we don't even realize.
This story really shows us that to understand why people act the way they do, we have to understand the historical shadows they're living in. The plotters weren't necessarily evil, they were just trapped by the logic of a very violent past. Lu Duan, on the other hand, was brave enough to step out of that shadow and choose a future built on rules and order. And this leaves us with a final thought. What invisible shadows from history are still shaping our world? What old fears or unwritten rules might be influencing our own decisions, our leaders, and our societies today? It's something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.